I'm tired and weary, but I'll still soldier on and right on until the end of the road. I will never succumb to the death of freedom and liberty in my native land. But having sat through all of the parliamentary proceedings of the passage of the Terrorism Act, having interviewed the Honourable Craig Murray, for example, the British ambassador arrested at Edinburgh Airport under terrorism legislation, having interviewed Richard Medhurst, Kit Clarenberg, and others who have faced the very same as I and my good wife Gayatri faced at Gatwick Airport yesterday morning, I can only say that up close and personal and in real life, it's way, way more ugly than it ever seemed before. To hear the words spoken by an armed policeman, his jacket off so you can gaze at his sidearm, that you are not under arrest, but you are not free to leave. To hear the words spoken, you do not have the right to remain silent. To hear the words spoken, that if you do not comply and cooperate and answer any and all of my questions, you will be automatically committing an offence under the Act. That's when I really knew that liberty in England, in Britain, in this once proud democratic country, a country that for many centuries boasted of the Magna Carta, many centuries boasted of its reasonableness, of its moderate nature, and castigated all others around the globe for falling short of our standards. That's when I knew that we as a country are in serious trouble. That a 71-year-old, 7 times elected British Member of Parliament, a Member of Parliament until last year and across 5 different decades, the leader of a legal British political party with hundreds of thousands of votes, and the presenter of virtually the biggest political current affairs show in the Anglosphere, in the Western world, I could end up with 2 armed police officers in a sealed room in an airport in England for no reason at all. Well, there is a reason, but it is not the reason that they stated. We were questioned, myself for around 4 hours, Gayatri for around 5 hours, and then released without charge. For what charge could there possibly have been? How could we, me and Gayatri, have anything to do with terrorism? How? Well, we certainly were not enlightened during the collective 9 hours of questioning. Not a single effort was made to show cause for having detained me and her with armed officers in public in an English airport. Not a single question. And they ranged far and wide, right down to Gayatri's famous fingernail, painted in the Palestinian colours. Why? Why is your fingernail painted in the Palestinian colours? What's your attitude to the conflict in Gaza? Who persuaded you of this point of view? Why do you admire Mr. Lavrov? Why are you so friendly to China, a country with which Britain maintains absolute and full diplomatic relations, and every big company in the United Kingdom is doing business with China, and we're not? They would dearly love to be. What does that have to do with terrorism? What do my views on Xi Jinping have to do with terrorism? What do my views on Lavrov have to do with terrorism? What does Gayatri's fingernail have to do with terrorism? Well, of course, you all know the answer is nothing at all. the reason why they detained us at the airport under the terrorism legislation, assuming that they already know that we are unintimidatable. If they don't know that, they're too stupid to be anti-terrorism police. They're too stupid to be in MI5. If they think they can intimidate me, not even death will intimidate me. So assuming they know that, there is only one reason why they detained us there under that legislation. It was to gain access to our communications, to confiscate phones, to confiscate laptops, and to enter and burgle and see what they can do with our private communications. They asked me for a password for a phone that was not mine. I said, I don't have the password. But if I did, I wouldn't give it to you. They said that would be an offense under the Terrorism Act. I said, well, here's my defense to it. Number one, I was, until last year, a member of Parliament. I'm in possession of vast amounts of confidential correspondence concerning my constituents, including constituents with troubles with the Greater Manchester Police. Secondly, I am a journalist and a broadcaster, as well as the leader of a British political party. I have contacts, sources in the police itself, in the security service itself. I have contacts in the civil service, in the Parliament, even in the government. Do you really think that I would betray my sources to you? You really think I'd put all these people in trouble at the mercy of you? And thirdly, and I'll move past this one swiftly, I am a litigant in a major, globally significant court case against Twitter, against Elon Musk, before the Dublin High Court. The case is at a critical juncture. You really think I'd give you access to such crucial, legally privileged and confidential information? But as it happens, I don't know the password. So I'm not refusing to give you the password. But if I knew the password, I would refuse. At that point, they could have charged me, but they did not. And we were released without charge. But not before I missed the speech I was to give at a meeting in central London in the presence, amongst others, of the ambassador of the aforementioned People's Republic of China. The meeting went very well in any case. My apologies to the organizers and to His Excellency, the Chinese ambassador. But it's come to something when a man like me, a man with the profile that I have, can be stopped by armed policemen at an English airport, held together with my wife for 9 hours, missing the engagement that I had come to London to perform, and having to make that weary journey back on the train with no phones, with no laptop, incommunicado, unable to speak with any of our family, any of our comrades, any of our friends, or any of our legal representatives. However, that latter point has now been resolved, and tomorrow Gayatri and I will fly to Belfast for a consultation with my lawyer, the esteemed Kevin Winters of KRW Law, and a press conference will follow at 4 p.m. in the KRW conference room in Belfast. I advise everyone to pay close attention to it, because I will be then making announcements of quite considerable importance. But of course, the world went on, although without access to social media, I'm actually a little bit behind the curve. But I do know that nothing changed in the Holy Land. I do know that Satan is still on the rampage in the Holy Land. And I did see him on stage to an empty hall in New York at the General Assembly of the United Nations. I don't know if you agree. I haven't seen the reviews for the reasons I've just explained. But he looked well past it. He looked well clapped out. He looked well beaten. He looked like a total loser. You're supposed to laugh, he said, in a non-punchline, in a punchline like Keir Starmer might have delivered. You're supposed to laugh, but nobody is laughing. But the world looks like it's going to have the last laugh over Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel has never been and never dreamt of being as isolated in the international community, the real international community, not the ones who live in Western countries and whose leaders have white faces. No, the international community, humanity, the world, 8 billion people, the vast majority of whom spit upon the name Netanyahu and hate Israel with a vengeance. And in the words of Megyn Kelly, the celebrated Republican from the United States, everybody under 30 in America hates Israel. And a very large number of those over 30 also. And the turning point in the U.S. attitudes to Netanyahu, to Trump's unnatural relationship with him, is closely tied to the motive and perhaps to the execution of Turning Point USA's founder and main star, Charlie Kirk, about whom more later and about whom there was much in Wednesday's show, if you have not yet caught up with it. I do know that they're still dying in the Lebanon. I do know that Israel is still itching to have another round with the Islamic Republic of Iran. I do know that they're still murdering people in Yemen. I do know that the danger of world war continues in Europe, in the theater of the Ukraine. I was present at an auspicious moment in Russia earlier this week when it became clear that Donald Trump finally was unmasked as someone who simply could not be trusted. Someone who speaks with a forked tongue. Someone who goes to Alaska and says that there's an Alaska track to a peaceful settlement of the NATO-Russia war in the Ukraine. Somebody who sends his emissaries to Moscow, where they're given a red carpet, where they're given royal treatment, and where everything seems to be getting back on normal track between the United States and Russia, but who, whenever Zelensky sits on him like a sofa that bears the impression of the last man that sat on it, I do know that when he gets back into the clutches of Miss Lindsey Graham and the other deranged, unhinged neocon warhawks in Washington, that the whole story changes and that NATO is free to give as many American weapons to Zelensky, who can do with them as he will. Now, there is the caveat that there ain't that many American weapons left in the armory. There is the caveat that without NATO soldiers firing some of these weapons, Zelensky will not be able to make use of him. But the signs are, and the portents are, that the crisis in Ukraine, which has taken the world so close to nuclear war, has not gone away. I do know that Keir Starmer with 11% approval rating in the United Kingdom, the lowest approval rating ever recorded since records began, the most hated Prime Minister in Britain's entire history, a history which includes Tony Blair and a history that includes Margaret Thatcher. The most hated Prime Minister has just launched as his flagship the most hated policy in the land, one which unites people of left, right and centre, people who agree on nothing else but agree that digital ID must be turned into Keir Starmer's poll tax moment. We have to bring Keir Starmer down, and we will never get a better opportunity than the one he himself, with Tony Blair's authorship very clear in it, by introducing something so un-British, something so unholy, something the electronic equivalent of police officers demanding that you show them your papers. All the things that we prided ourselves upon. Unarmed police, no ID being required by a Gestapo at airports or on the streets. We, the land of hope and glory, we, the land green and pleasant, we, the land that said that we fought and our grandparents died to preserve freedom and liberty in our land, are slipping into a tyranny so grave that even Donald Trump has to call it out on his visit to Windsor Castle. Even Vice President J.D. Vance has to highlight how liberty in England is dying in front of our eyes. Now, my last words for the moment are these. I have been flying in and out of this country all of my life. Over the last 3 years, I have been flying in and out of this country more than I could count. From Russia, from China, from Iran, flying in and out with nothing more than a good morning, sir, at the border. What changed yesterday? Why was I stopped for the first time in my entire life? 50 more years in politics. Why? What changed? I'll tell you what changed. Shabana Mahmood changed. The new Home Secretary or Interior Minister for those outside of this island. She was my student once. I can't claim she was my best student. I wouldn't ordinarily boast that she learned from me. But when she was a fledgling council candidate, along with others, in the Embassy of Pakistan and in the House of Commons, I tutored her in how half passably you could speak in public in English. Now that she's the Home Secretary, she ordered those armed Gestapo to arrest me, to hold me, to grill me, and to grill my wife for even longer. It's all coming up. It's the mother of all talk shows.